Welcome to more World of Warplanes content from the Noble Queue. In this video I'm looking at the Tier 10 Tech Tree British light fighter, the Supermarine Swift. Hello there, and here on the tarmac outside my hangar is the Supermarine Swift. This aircraft suffered from a flawed design process, and that left it with a lot of handling defects, and also the engine was changed from the Rolls-Royce Nene series to what would become the famous Rolls-Royce Avon series, a much narrower engine, but the airframe was not redesigned and therefore retained its portly appearance. It wasn't a popular aircraft with the RAF. There were a series of accidents, including fatal ones, and having been introduced in 1954, its service history came to an abrupt close in 1961, and it was also the subject of a very British scandal when it became clear that the project was being considered for cancellation after enormous development costs. In the game, it is swift. Truly, it is swift. It's also surprisingly manoeuvrable. Many people overlook that this aircraft is as manoeuvrable, for instance, as the MEP-1101. However, it has a pair of Aden cannons, and these are very tricky to land, and therefore, coming at the end of the very easy to fly Spitfire line, many people find this a challenging aircraft. Having specialised it, I've come to love it. What we'll do now is we'll look at the numbers, and if you don't want to see those, you'll be missing a lot of good information, but use a link below the video to skip ahead to another part of it. Here we have the spreadsheet for all of the Tier 10 fighters. There are 8 of them, as you can see across the sheet here. And if you don't know how this sheet works, in the description below there is a link to an instructional video. Go and watch that, and then you'll know what's going on here. So with that, let's turn to the gun armament on the Swift, which is in this pair of columns here. Rating is 39, cumulative DPS 660, third best in class. It's the same rating as the MiG-15 BIS, but it does lag quite a long way behind the FW252 and particularly the MEP-1101, which has sensational guns. What we have are a pair of British 30mm cannons, Adens, with a DPS of 330, rate of fire of 300, decent range of 2,625 feet. Auto aim angle is 3, which is pretty decent for cannons. That's the amount you can be off target by, and the game will correct your aim for you. And a pretty good dispersion angle of 0.5. 0.6 is often more common in cannons, and that's the way that the shells spread out as they leave the muzzle of your gun. So obviously if they spread out less, they're more accurate. Overheat time, however, like many of these Tier 10 fighters, is only 3 seconds, which means if you miss and have to correct your aim, you very well start overheating before you do any significant damage. And the shell velocity on these guns is only 1,385 feet, which means that lead is a bit tricky. When you compare that to the shell velocity on the MEP-1101 guns, for instance, at nearly 1,800 feet per second, you can see that it's much easier to lead and hit. And this can leave you in the situation where if you miss for 1 or 2 seconds, you haven't actually got much burst length left to do damage. Similar story with the MiG-15 BIS, except it's even worse insofar as it has mixed armament with widely different shell velocities, which means as an aircraft is banking away from you, you may very well find you only land 1 weapons group. So at least with the Swift, you have only got 1 group of weapons to worry about. Survivability, it's rated at second best in class at 13. However, these figures are all compressed. They're pretty close across the board for all of the aircraft. There's not that much difference. And 500 hit points won't go very far if you're being hit by a javelin, for instance. Damage resistance, 46. It's okay. Fire resistance is best in class at 50, but 50 is actually quite a low figure. You need to be careful here. If you choose to put an uprated engine on this aircraft, you may have to think about whether you want to fit a mount and first aid dressing package, or indeed the pilot needing fire resistance or firefighter skills. And here's the thing that most people know about the Swift. It is swift. It's very rapid indeed. Rating is 92, which is far above anything else in the class. Cruise speed 384, maximum boost speed of 652, and a marvellous dive speed of 745 miles an hour are all best in class. The boost duration is 8 seconds, which is actually right in the middle here. Most of the aircraft have 8, if not less. The Focke-Wulf 252 has 10 seconds. And because of that airspeed, a lot of people overlook the manoeuvrability, but for an air superiority fighter, it is pretty good. As you can see, the rating is 61, and that's the same as the MEP-1101. Now, a word of caution here, when it comes to specialised aircraft, in the past, experienced players were in the habit of putting special project equipment on the MEP-1101, So it could be that even if you've got your Swift specialised, you're not going to outturn one of these. You need to still be careful with these. Not so much the problem with the MiG-15 bis. Now, people do put surprise manoeuvrability builds on this, but they don't tend to load it up with special project equipment, so you probably will be able to be competitive with the MiG-15 bis. However, as everyone knows, the Sabre is a marvellously manoeuvrable aircraft as well as being rapid. You are not going to outturn one of these. You must use slash and burn techniques, and you must get your lead right, because you want to do a lot of damage and then buzz off before this thing chases you down. And there is a reason why it won't chase you down, provided you're very careful in your attacks and carry a lot of speed into them. And I'll talk about that in a moment. As for the Focke-Wulf 252, the manoeuvrability is horrible, but it does have a high roll rate. You will be able to catch up one of these things. You can treat it as a heavy and just shoot it down at will if you get on its tail. And with the term fighters, they have greater manoeuvrability, as you would expect, but they have inferior speed and altitude performance. You will want to dive on them, shoot them hard, and then buzz off before they can actually turn and do anything about it. Your typical slash and burn or even boom and zoom techniques. Altitude performance, it's rated at second best in class, but you need to watch this. You've got high altitude fighters, the first 5 in this comparison, and as you can see here, amongst the high altitude fighters, 77 is actually right at the bottom of the scale. The Sabre and the MiG-15 bis have much better altitude performance and conceivably could very well be above you even when you're at the limit of your altitude performance, so watch out for that. And the MEP 1101 and the Focke-Wulf 252 have equally good altitude performance. One thing it is worth noting, you've got a really good climb rate, which is best in class, 630. Now, as you would expect, your altitude performance is much better than the term fighters, these 3 over here. You want to use that against them. Now, when it comes to thrust to weight may indicate the speed acceleration potential of the aircraft. I say may because I'm pretty sure that drag is implemented in the game, but we have zero information on that, unfortunately, so we've no idea whether an aircraft will respond well to you kicking the thrust in or not. At first blush to me, this 0.3541 figure actually seemed quite good, but as you scan across, alright, it is going to potentially out-accelerate the MEP 1101. Yeah, I think that's probably true because this aircraft, the MEP 1101, feels quite sluggish to me. Surprisingly, it's as good as the Sabre. That may save you if the Sabre is in a low energy configuration and you come in quickly, hit it hard with those cannons, and then fly away at speed. It may take the Sabre too long to actually accelerate to catch up with you. However, you need to be more careful with the MiG-15 bis, which is as manoeuvrable, and it apparently accelerates much more quickly. You need to destroy this, or you need to avoid the engagement. Otherwise, you may find that even if you zoom away from it, it's quick enough to turn and speed up and keep up with you long enough for it to hit you with the weapons. At any rate, you want to maneuver violently as you fly away from the MiG-15 bis to throw off at least one of those weapons groups. The Focke-Wulf is probably not going to turn, even though it can accelerate very quickly. Basically, if you do get it on its tail at roughly the same speed, you'll probably shoot it down like a pseudo heavy. I do want to draw your attention over here, though. There are some pretty good acceleration figures on these turn fighters. Make sure you are carrying a lot of speed when you go in to attack these, particularly the Key 1623, which has an eye-watering 0.8439 thrust to weight ratio and probably a fairly small drag potential. And again, I've been checking this and it does feel like that aircraft accelerates quickly. Now, it's not going to stay with you over a long distance, but it might be quick enough to keep up with you for longer than you would like and hit you with its fairly heavy weaponry. And make you fairly miserable, thinking that you haven't carried enough speed into your attack and you didn't get away quickly enough. We look at the worst in class figures. Well, as we can see, I said the survivability figures were all compressed, so even though you're seeing some best in class figures there, they're also turning red here. Airspeed, boost duration is right in the middle. Maneuverability, there's a fair amount of red there, but don't be fooled. Most of the aircraft that you'll be competing against, you will have control of the engagement if they are term fighters, and you should try and make sure you have the advantage when you're going in against any of the other fighters, such as the MEP 110, particularly the Sabre, the MiG, and the FW52 here. So provided you control your engagements, you've got plenty of manoeuvrability here. Altitude performance, as I say, for an air superiority fighter, you just need to be a little bit careful. Whilst you want to be above your opponents, there are some that have the potential to be above you, particularly the Sabre and the MiG-15 bis. And the thrust to weight, as you can see, actually came up slightly red there. So where does that position this aircraft? Stock, I think this is a real challenge because of the guns, and people don't like flying it because they just can't do the damage quickly enough to knock enemies out of the sky. Specialized, I think, is a different story, and I think there are two distinctive builds here which can be employed, and the one I like, because it's what I'm good at, is the manoeuvrability build, the surprise manoeuvrability build, the one that catches opponents out, because this thing actually is much more maneuverable than people realize. However, clearly with that airspeed set of airspeed figures, the full speed build is an opportunity as well. So we'll be looking at a number of builds in the post-build effects section, and we'll compare the figures, and that will help you judge what you want to do. But as I say, what you want to be doing with this is specializing it as quickly as possible, because I think it's going to be a bit of a drag flying its stock in today's meta on the EU server, particularly where there are an awful lot of bombers around. And you also need to decide what your target priorities are. Are you going to try and mix it in dogfights, hence maneuverability build, or are you going to just hunt down bombers and heavies and ground attackers, and therefore the speed build might suit you? So let's go and see how I've built this aircraft. We're back with the Swift outside my hangar, and my aircraft is specialised, which means I have all of the equipment and consumable slots available. When you first get this aircraft, what will you be missing? Well, you'll be missing one of the equipment slots on the engine. There are two, of which you will only have one available, and also on the forward-firing weapon. And of those two, this is the one that I regret, the one on the engine, especially if you want to try and build this aircraft for speed, because it means you're going to have to make a choice between an uprated engine and a high-speed gas turbine. And in fact, if I were playing this aircraft stock, I think I probably would go for the manoeuvrability build first, and then consider switching to a high speed build when I've got the aircraft specialised and you've got both of these slots available. The forward firing weapon, a little bit of a nuisance, but you can live with it, although the guns are tricky. As far as the consumables concerned, you're missing one off the engine, so probably you're not going to have an engine restart bottle, assuming you're going to mount the engine cooling consumable, which I think is almost always the first choice for a fighter. So we'll pop that back into specialist configuration, and we'll see what I actually did. And as we can see, we have a gun sight in the cockpit slot. And you could have had cockpit armor, navigational radio equipment, or the G-suit. Now, I think the gun sight, certainly for a maneuverability build, is the obvious choice. If you do have a high-speed build, bear in mind that your maximum speed before your manoeuvrability characteristics degrade is 559 miles an hour, and you're probably going to be trying to fly faster than that most of the time. You might just want to consider mounting a G-suit here for that little bit of extra manoeuvrability at high speeds, and it does have a bonus characteristic which improves the accuracy of the weapon slightly. So that's a possibility. I probably wouldn't, but just bear that in mind. So what have we got with the gun sight? Well, first off, it's about halfway calibrated, so we've got an 18% improvement in accuracy of the forward-firing armament, and that means that the dispersion angle has been narrowed, so the shells don't spread out so much. If I was to fully calibrate this, you could get that up to 21%. Adverse effect, the pilot is more susceptible to injury. As far as the bonus characteristics are concerned, I've put on another 5% of accuracy, so at the moment it's actually 23 coming from this gun sight. I've picked off the characteristic which improves the pilot's resistance to injury to offset the negative effect just above, and then I've got 3% accuracy of forward-firing offensive armament again. Sorry, that 5% accuracy, I beg your pardon, is for moving targets, so that's your auto-aim angle is widened, so you can be off target by more and still hit. The 3% at the bottom is the one that improves the accuracy, and that means I've got 21% more accuracy on this at the moment, with the possibility of getting up to 24. I don't tend to use the critical damage characteristics and the fire improving your fire chances characteristic on high DPS guns, and these are relatively high DPS. I tend to reserve those for low DPS guns where I need to cripple the enemy as well as do whatever damage I can to them. And if we go on to the airframe, choices are, and we have to wait for it slightly, reinforced skin, reinforced airframe. I guess there are some people who might go for some extra HP. Possibly you might consider the reinforced airframe if you're going to have a high-speed gas turbine and an uprated engine and you want to chase down things with nasty rear gunners. Probably not the reinforced skin, I would suggest. Otherwise, polished skin for a speed build or lightweight wing frame. And because I've gone for a manoeuvrability build, it's obviously going to be the lightweight wing frame here. I will show the effect of a polished skin in the post-build section. And as we can see, I've fully calibrated this. So I've got the 15% roll manoeuvrability and 4.2% manoeuvrability in turns improvement. I've lost some aircraft HP, so try not to get shot, and also my wings resistance is lower by 9.5%. As far as the bonus characteristics are concerned, I'd probably reassemble these if I was doing this right now, and what I would do is I'd take off the tails resistance to critical damage and put on the wings resistance to offset that negative effect just above. And then I would possibly pick off more manoeuvrability in turns, I think, and then leave the yaw manoeuvrability in place as well. When we come to the engine, just dropping off the high-speed gas turbine for a moment, because again I've gone for a manoeuvrability build, we have the lightweight power unit. Your choices here, of course, are as follows: engine armor protection, lightweight power unit, and uprated engine. If you're going to go for the speed build, you're going to pick the uprated engine, but then you're going to have to think about that slightly low fire risk, a fire resistance figure of 50. Engine armor protection, well, this aircraft is all about speed. Even in a manoeuvrability build, I really would be reluctant to fit this. I'm not sure there would be many people who would choose this, but if you're one of them, let me know and give me your reasons why. So on the lightweight power unit, we have it nearly fully calibrated. It pretty much doesn't make any difference from here on in. You can get it up to 10% yaw manoeuvrability and 4% manoeuvrability in turns. I'm not sure why you can get to 466 and still apparently have the full effect. Maybe there's some sort of little bit of rounding error there, and there is a little bit more to come. Fire engine's resistance to damage is not very nice at 20% down. And I've got bonus characteristics of more yaw manoeuvrability and 1.5% cruise speed. Probably change those. There is a 5% engine's resistance to critical damage improvement to offset the 20% that you're losing. I'd definitely pick that off. I'd probably keep the 2% yaw manoeuvrability, and then also then keep the 1% cruise speed. I don't think I'd go for the acceleration bonus characteristics. Now on the forward firing weapon, and what are your choices? Well, there is an attractive choice here, which, or at least some people will think it attractive. I've mentioned that we've got an overheat time of 3 seconds. And although you will lose accuracy, some may be tempted to go for the reinforced bolt carriers. Now, I haven't shown the effect of reinforced bolt carriers in the post-build section, so in a moment I'm going to pop one of these on and we'll see what it gives. Your other choices, your range is 2,625 feet. Some of you may still want to mount long gun barrels, although you will lose burst length if you do that. And you've only got 3, so I think that's a tricky choice. And for me, I wanted to bump up the DPS, so I picked the gas-operated action. So let's just see if I've got some reinforced bolt carriers that I can mount for the moment, and we'll see what the effects are. Well, hasn't everybody got ultimate level experimental equipment just lying around in the depot? I know I have. I'm not going to put that one on, though. I'll put on the standard equipment. It's probably a fairer thing to do. And let's see what we've got. Now, it's not calibrated, so bear in mind that the 15.7% burst length here is going to be increased potentially up to nearly 25%. So that's a quarter. So that's 0.75 seconds on 3. So you'll nearly get you'll get about 3.75 seconds worth of burst. That's quite nice. The adverse is that your accuracy has gone down by 15%, offsetting a lot of the good that the gun sight is doing here. As far as bonus characteristics are concerned, I probably would pick off the cooldown rates. Interesting. If you're going for burst length, you might want to pick off the burst length characteristic, which is second from bottom there, and get another 5%, so potentially taking it up to just about 30%. Very nearly a whole second, certainly 0.85, something like that, 0.9 of a second. That would be worth doing. Then keep the accuracy, because you're losing accuracy, and then perhaps pick off the 10% cooldown rate of forward firing offensive armament. So that's if you were to mount the reinforced bolt carriers. And the reason I've shown that to you is because you're not going to see it in the post-build effect. So bear that in mind. I'm going to reset, though, because I have gone for the gas-operated action, which is fully calibrated as near as makes no difference. So we're getting 18.8% improvement in the rate of fire, which goes towards your DPS. We lose 10% accuracy. And then on the bonus characteristics, I've got 10% cooldown rate on the guns, 5% extra damage to increase the DPS even further. This is an experimental piece of equipment, that's why that characteristic is there. It's not on the standard. You'd probably have to pick off more cooldown rate or something like that. And then an extra 5% burst length. What else could we have done? We've got a chance of causing a fire, not on high DPS weaponry, not for me. Another 5% burst length there, or a 10% chance of causing fire. So I'm pretty happy with these characteristics on this experimental equipment. Consumables, if we just look at the survivability figure, it hasn't changed because I haven't mounted an uprated engine. There are no other adverse effects, so I'm happy to mount a first aid dressing package here. For extra manoeuvrability, I've got the pneumatic control assist for 10 seconds worth of extra manoeuvrability. I've got the engine cooling for 10 seconds of extra boost if you've got at least 1 second left, of course. If you've got nothing and you activate this, then it won't do anything. And then I've got the engine restart bottle. If you're going all out for speed, you might consider putting on one of the improved mixture controls. And I recommend that you mount universal ammunition, which will give you an extra chance of fire and critical damage. If you are going to use gold, and the only reason I'm using gold is because I want to try and use up that gold that I've got in the top right there, try and get that figure down, then as these are cannons, you will want to use fragmentation ammunition, I would suggest. So that's how I've set the aircraft up. In the post-build effects, you'll see the effects of a pure speed build plus one other build. So watch out for that section. But what we're going to do now is talk about crew skills. I've brought up the dialogue box for the pilot. This is a dedicated pilot to this aircraft because it's not a premium, it's not a crew trainer. And how you build this pilot is going to be dependent on whether you're broadly leaning towards a manoeuvrability build, such as I have, or a speed build. And if you're doing the kind of build that I've got, then probably your first two characteristics are going to be the aerodynamics expert and then probably the aerobatics expert. There is an argument for you going for Engine Guru 1 first, or Marksman 1 first as well, but certainly aerodynamics first, and then either this one, or this one first. And in order of priority for me, because I'm emphasizing manoeuvrability, it's this one, but accuracy would be a good one to go for. And if you don't like the way the guns handle, you probably go for Marksman 1 first, and then you go for Engine Guru 1. And here is where it gets a bit tricky in the game on the EU server these days. I would have normally said in the past, just build towards Engine Guru 2 and Marksman 2, and as you can see I've gone for Marksman 2 to improve the accuracy of these guns even further and try and make them handle better. It's a good thing to do. However, given the incidence of criticals on the EU server these days, there is an argument for getting this skill, maybe this skill, and this skill, and then considering battle tested. And the reason for that is it reduces the chance of injury to your pilot. And I must admit, I'm getting pretty fed up with following things that have got nasty rear gunners. Finding my pilot is shot out, I use my first aid dressing kit, and the pilot is instantly shot out again. That never used to happen in the game, but now happens quite a lot. So if you're experiencing the same, you might want to consider mounting battle tested as your fifth skill here. Otherwise, it's concentrate on this group, and then you've got a very, very long way up to something like cruise speed or resilience, which I like. And if you are going to really mix it in dogfights, you might want to consider evasive target. The emphasis is slightly different if you go for a speed build. Not much, but just slightly different. Again, and assuming you've got speed equipment and fitted, you're going to go for aerodynamics expert first, at least I think so, to improve the effect of that equipment by 40%. It does that on manoeuvrability equipment as well, which is why it's generally the first skill I go for. But then you're going to go all out on the engine, so you'll go Engine Guru 1, probably go for Marksman 1, and then drop that, get Engine Guru 2, and then go back to the Marksman skills, or possibly that battle-tested skill again. Now, this is going to mean that the guns are not going to handle quite so nicely, so you win in one area, you lose in another. Of course, that's always an opportunity cost when you put one skill on instead of another. And then beyond that, you'd probably go for cruise speed. So that's a rough out of the skills that you would use for two quite distinctive builds. They differ a little bit, principally in whether you're going to be using this skill or not. So let's go and have a look at the post-build effects, where I'll show you the effects of the choices I've made for my aircraft, the manoeuvrability build, but I'll also illustrate the effects of a couple of other builds. Here we have a spreadsheet showing the effects of my choices, which are equipment, calibration level, bonus characteristics, consumables, Livery is important here. I have a chrome livery mounted on this aircraft, which means it's 3% faster in cruise speed, and of course pilot skills as well. Now, you'd have seen these base figures before if you looked at the aircraft statistics section. They're in columns C and D. In columns E and F, we have the effects of all those choices that I've made. In column G, we have the difference in absolute terms, and then in column H, we have the difference in percentage terms. There are two further builds off to the right, similar sort of idea. We'll discuss those when we come to them. Now, just as a reminder, my build is a gun sight, an experimental lightweight wing frame, high-speed gas turbine, lightweight power unit, and experimental gas-operated action on the guns. And what's happened to those guns? Well, the rating has gone up to 49, nearly 26% increase, and the DPS is a rather eye-catching 823. This is very nice indeed. Of course, the MEP 1101, people can build that out to make the DPS even higher, but the base is 800, so we've managed to get over at least that figure. Let's go and look in detail what's happened. So the DPS has gone up to 412 per gun, the rate of fire has gone up to 356, and the range is unchanged at 2,625 feet. You'd have had to use long gun barrels to affect that. Got a nice improvement on the auto aim angle, so we can now nearly be off target by 3.5 degrees, and the game will correct your aim and still hit the aircraft that you're aiming at. We've managed to narrow the way that the shells spread out from the muzzle of those cannons to 0.39. That's a 21.6% improvement. We've even managed to improve the overheat time slightly to 3.15 seconds. I'm not showing the effects of reinforced bolt carriers in this comparison here, but I did in the previous section, and I reckon you can probably get that up to about 3.9 if you're going to use reinforced bolt carriers, which is something you should do if you're particularly bothered by the short overheat cycle. Shell velocity is unaffected, of course, at 1,385 feet per second. There's a small adverse effect on survivability. We've lost a rating point here. We've lost 26 hit points as well, so don't get shot. And the damage resistance has gone down to 43 from 46. However, for me, crucially, the fire resistance remains at 50. Airspeed, we have got some improvements here, despite me concentrating on manoeuvrability. The rating's gone up to 98. We've managed to get a 26 mile an hour improvement on cruise speed, despite not using an operated engine. A 34 mile an hour increase on the boost maximum speed, so I can flee a bit more quickly for 10 seconds. And the boost duration, unfortunately, has lost 0.8 of a second, so we've gone down from 8 to 7.2. No effect on that excellent dive speed of 745 miles an hour. Now, this build is all about manoeuvrability, and we've got a significant increase from 61 to 76. If you encounter MEP 1101s or MiG-15 BISSes that have been built for speed or not built for manoeuvrability at least, then you are going to be able to outturn them, as well as probably still outrun them in an encounter, and that gives you significant advantages. Beware, as a reminder, experienced pilots often put their special project equipment in period 3 on the MEP 1101. They can crank up the manoeuvrability to around about 79. So assess your opponent and check whether you can outturn them or not. The same is not normally true of the MiG-15 BISS. You do get occasional surprise manoeuvrability builds, but generally not based on special project equipment. So you're probably going to be able to turn with that even if it's been maxed out for manoeuvrability. The precise effects here, well, we've gone up by 15 points, so that's very nearly 25%. And what we've got is the turn time for a 360-degree turn down to 9.39 seconds, 13% improvement. And the roll rate has improved to 149. It's quite useful because the roll rate isn't actually that great on this aircraft. So that's a 24.3% improvement. We'll also just highlight here, relevantly, the manoeuvrability for yaw has gone up by 20.2%. So this is a much more flexible aircraft in terms of the way that it handles through the air. And of course, the controllability is pretty good at 83.3. It will respond pretty quickly to instructions to change direction. No effects on any of the other things here, of course. On the altitude performance, because of that high-speed gas turbine, we've got a 39 feet per second increase, which is useful, to 669 feet. Other effects that aren't visible in figures in the UI, we've got a 10% improvement in the cooldown rate of the guns. Because of the bonus characteristics I picked, we have a 3% increased tail damage resistance, which I would probably drop in order to minimize this wing damage resistance, which is 9.5%. Change a bonus characteristic and you can reduce that, and I probably would. Got 11% more chance of pilot injury resistance. Well, maybe that might push you towards selecting that battle-tested skill at some point on your pilot. And the 20% engine damage resistance, which is fairly unpleasant. and you will be needing an engine restart bottle. On the airspeed, the engines will cool down 15% quicker. The acceleration with boost is 12.1% better. It's 3% better without boost. That's because I haven't got an uprated engine. And here's just that note there that the UI misses the 3% effect of the chrome livery on cruise speed. Now, the other way you can build this aircraft at the other extreme is a pure speed build, and that is the effects of that are shown in columns I and J. And what would you mount? Well, gun sight, kept that the same. Polished skin instead of the lightweight wing frame. High-speed gas turbine. Substitute in a uprated engine for the lightweight power unit, and in this case I've kept the experimental gas-operated action. So the guns are going to be exactly the same as the previous build, so we'll skip over that quickly. Survivability, again, we've lost a hit point, but for slightly different reasons. We've got our full complement of 500 hit points, hurrah. The damage resistance has gone down by 1 point to 45, and here's the one that I'm slightly concerned about. The fire resistance is now below 40. Getting into the territory where you're thinking about, do I need to fit a fire extinguisher rather than first aid dressing kit? Do I need fire resistance? Do I need firefighter skills on the pilot? Which I always regret using skill points for, but with this build, you might have to consider it. What we have got is a vast improvement in the airspeed, 104 points, which is 12 points more, 13%, and we've got the cruise speed out to 485, which is a massive 101 miles an hour faster. That's really impressive. We've got 686 on the boost maximum speed. That's because the high-speed gas turbine was in place on the previous build, so there's no variance there, 34 miles an hour. We've still lost 0.8 of a second boost duration, no effect on the dive speed, of course. Manoeuvrability has been compromised, but it's actually slightly worse than the base aircraft. The turn time has gone out to 10.88 seconds, which is 0.08 of a second worse. Got a slight improvement on the roll rate, but not much, nothing to write home about. And then on the altitude performance, it's gone up to 78. A gain of 1 point because we've got that spilled advantage from the high-speed gas turbine of 669 feet climb rate, which is 39 better. On the survivability, we should have a 10% cooldown rate on the guns there because we haven't changed them. Let's just copy that across. Survivability, we've got 11% pilot injury resistance is down. And that makes it awkward because you're having to consider whether you want to fire extinguisher with this build, which means you can't use the first aid dressing kit. Airspeed, 20% engine cooldown rate, 14.2% better acceleration without boost this time, uprated engine, 12.1% acceleration with boost, 10.5% acceleration in a dive, and there's that note about the UI missing the effect of the chrome livery, and we've also lost a little bit of manoeuvrability on the yaw. So this build is for hunting down heavies in particular, maybe bombers, provided they don't have awful rear gunners and ground attackers, and it's not for dogfighting. But as you can see, your speed is quite eye-wateringly quick. You will get around the map very quickly. And we've got something of a different concept here for the third build. So this is summarised in the effects of which are summarised in columns M and N, and what we have is a G suit, not a gun sight. Polished skin, high-speed gas turbine, uprated engine, and then the long gun barrels. So see the effects. So the guns will be affected this time because we swapped out the gas-operated action in favour of gun barrels, and the rating is now only 41. It's still an improvement of 2 points, and the DPS has gone up by 33 to 693. Precisely on the guns, we now have 347 DPS, and we have, which is a reduction, of course, from the previous build. We have the same rate of fire of 300 because we're not using the gas-operated action, but we have got a much improved range. Now, the concept here is that if you're going to be using this as a high-altitude interceptor, and you're chasing down heavies, for instance, you want to be able to shoot them earlier and more consistently at longer ranges. But you will have to manage your guns a lot more carefully under this build, as I'll show in a moment. Auto aim angle's gone up to 3.47. That's still that 15.5% improvement. Dispersion angle is a bit greater, which is not marvellous news since you're trying to fire at greater range, so the dispersion angle gets, the effect of that becomes progressively more marked as you fire at longer ranges. Still, it's gone down to 0.3 from 0.5, and 0.5 is pretty good for a cannon, so you might live with that. Here's the one that I really don't like. We're now down to a burst length of 2.61 seconds, and that's why I don't use the long gun barrels. However, if you are desperate to get that range increase, then this is your option. And of course, the shell velocity is unchanged. Because we're using an uprated engine, just quickly, the survivability, we've still got that compromising figure of 39.5 on the fire resistance. Airspeed is still good. The rating's now up to 105, which is a 14.1% increase. Still 485 miles an hour on the cruise speed. 691 miles an hour on the boost. Maximum speed's gone up by 39 miles an hour now, so that's nice. Still losing 0.8 of a second on the boost duration. We still got the same dive speed of 745 miles an hour. Manoeuvrability is compromised under this build, of course, because you're going for speed, not manoeuvrability. So you've lost a point. You've got that 10.88 seconds to turn 360 degrees. Roll manoeuvrability has slightly increased by 2, in other words, identical to the previous build. But here's the one that people may not be aware of. The navigation, the G-suit improves your altitude performance. And I did say that this, for an air superiority fighter, is actually lacking some altitude performance. It's at the bottom of the range of the 5 aircraft at tier 10 that are air superiority fighters. And this corrects that, because now we've got 672 feet per second climb rate, and the service ceiling has increased. So you can get up higher to 15,650. Now, I'm not going to say that this effect is going to change your life in this aircraft, but it is there, and that climb rate does mean that you may very well be able to get away from anything that's pursuing you and trying to climb, and you can use the classic hammerhead turn and turn on it when it stalls and comes down on it. Or just basically get away from it, then level off and keep flying away. We just look at the other things. We've got 7.5% pilot injury resistance, so that's improved. So that's nice. Got the 20% engine cooldown rate again. No changes to the acceleration on the previous build. 14.2% with no boost, 12.1% with boost, 10.5% acceleration in dive, and the manoeuvrability at high speeds, which I guess means when you're into the yellow speeds, when your UI indicates, your HUD indicates that you're in the yellow speeds. This is when this will kick in. It won't kick in at normal speeds, but you get very nearly 20% extra manoeuvrability at high speeds. That could be welcome when you're pursuing something that tries to roll away from you or quickly flick and flack about in front of you to try and throw your aim off. ME-262s which go up and down when they're climbing, that kind of thing. And you lose 1.8% your manoeuvrability. So if you're going to go for a pure speed build, you might consider that G-suit, and I thought I'd throw it in here for an interesting comparison. Okay, but I went for the manoeuvrability build, which is the first of these on the spreadsheet. Let's go and see how the aircraft performed in battle. The map on which the battle you're about to see takes place is Plateau. It's the Turning Point variant, which is a 5-sector map. And these are laid out in a rather skewed 5 spots of the die configuration. In the centre, we have a garrison, which is tactically important because it allows easy access to the other sectors. However, strategically important on one axis are 2 command centres, one near each spawn point, and on the other axis, likewise, a pair of air bases. Now, the command centres release bomber flights, which will try to flip enemy sectors to your side, and the air bases confer a number of benefits, such as being a spawn point, which is convenient for getting to a command centre that happens to be held by the enemy. You can get a different aircraft of the same tier if you're destroyed, or you can get full repairs. Now, you may think that the best way to win this map is to hold your local command centre and airbase, and then the garrison for at least longer than the enemy. Usually at low to mid tiers, it doesn't work out that way. What actually happens is you tend to hold, say, an airbase and the command centre on one side, and then the garrison. And at high tiers, with lots of bombers, you may very well just be going around and trying to capture sectors as soon as the bombers have flipped them. And if we look at the order of battle, we can see that we have a specialised SU-10, myself in the Swift, and a J7W3, which is not specialised. And we're lined up against 2 specialised EF-131s and a specialised MEP-1101. And just on the basis of the aircraft, the enemy team here has a huge advantage. Nevertheless, let's see how this battle played out. As we go into battle, I'll mention that this is a natively recorded replay file, so you'll get to see me looking around using sniper mode, and the reticle will be properly aimed. Might be a little bit more jerky than the standard World of Warplanes replay file. So off we go. We're heading towards the airbase, and we're going to see if we can capture that. We'll be looking for the heavies first. I can see the first one of them. Need to know where the second one is. And with a little bit of gun management, as you see coming up, I can dispose of this fairly easily. Now, if I was on the speed build, after destroying this, I would probably fly straight off on the assumption that the other heavy is coming for me. It is, but because I have the manoeuvrability build, I can use that against this heavy. And we'll chase it down. And here's the lead coming into operation. You can see me kick it out a lot further as I realise I'm not giving enough lead. Managing the guns because you've only got that short burst length. That's the second heavy down. Now we need to try and take out one of these Spitfires. Don't quite manage it there. Swing round. Get onto a different Spitfire. Again, adjusting the lead. And don't quite manage to finish that one off either. But then it blows up and we have the sector. Meanwhile, we've got our local command centre as well. And the enemy team has got exactly the same. No surprises there. So now we're going to chase down this wiggling aircraft in front of us. Down that goes. That was an FJ1. The enemy has already got their command centre, so we're going to head into the centre, do a little bit of defence here. Not too much. With these bombers in the game, can't really defend sectors. So we get onto an F-94D, which can't quite get the angle to release its rockets at me, tries to avoid instead. I get its tail. It's not particularly a manoeuvrable aircraft anyway, so now I've got a huge advantage, and I dispose of that. And at this point I decide it's time to go off and see if we can capture the command centre, on the basis that I can't keep on just defending in the middle, the least important sector of all, although tactically it allows easy access to the other sectors, of course. First up, we have an incoming IL-40. Some good shots into that. You can see the big hit doing critical damage. I leave that on the assumption that something else can shoot it down because I want to get after these Spitfires. And wiggles effectively, so I don't get as much on it as I would like. Swing around for another, and this is where the manoeuvrability build comes into its own. We've gone 3 sectors to 2 down. No need to panic, that's to be expected in a game full of bombers. In fact, as we have a 30-point lead, we're doing pretty much okay at the moment. With the first Spitfire, swing round with the manoeuvrability build to address another one. Better lead this time. That one goes down. Size up the last one. And down that goes. Nothing more I can do here. Just have to assume that the aircraft that are here will now be able to take this sector now that I've softened it up for them. Come across an F-84. F. Get some good shots into that and absolutely destroy it. Decide to avoid going for the MEP-110 because it's over the least important sector as far as I'm concerned. Would like to hang on to this airfield and try and get this FJ1 out again. Down that goes too. Something below me which I can go for, so I destroy that as well. That was an F-84B, the tier 9. Swing up. This looks like one of the bat wings. I help destroy that. Can swing around quickly. That's the F-131. I'm behind him. That's not a good idea for me, and I decline the engagement. Chances are the rear gunner would have absolutely destroyed me before I got anywhere near. So we need to go off and find something else to do. We can chase down the heavy, we can shoot at the IL-40. The heavy's within range. The IL-40 fortunately is lined up with him, so I can shoot that without losing positional advantage over the heavy, but now I'm going to concentrate on the ME-262. The way these fly up and down, wiggling around there, can be quite hard to hit, but I've disposed of him, and now we're 4 sectors to 1 up. Now I don't expect that to last, so I need to keep pushing here. We'll go after the IL-40, see if we can try and at least hold this sector for a bit longer. I did notice there was an EF-131 in the sector as well, and I may decline to fight that. I lose my pilot, put him back in, destroy the IL-40. The F-131 is kicking around behind me. I'm not sure I actually noticed that. In fact, I did. I turned for it, looked at the health, and then I saw something coming in on the right and decided I should go for that first. If I went for the F-131, even if it didn't destroy me with its rear gunner, this heavy would have certainly taken shots at me. So I have to dispose of that first. Always get rid of the escorts first. And this time I disposed of that quite quickly. The EF-131 is still unfavourably situated as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to go at him from behind to try and catch him up because that rear gunner will decimate me. So we decide to disengage from that and go for the heavy. That's a tight game and we've gone 3-2 down, no surprises. So I want to try and cling on to this sector for as long as I possibly can, give my bomber a chance to take other sectors. Gun management is important here. As usual, the ME-262 wiggles about in slightly difficult fashion. But we dispose of him, and we've now taken a sector back. We're about to lose another one, so it's still going to be in the balance. The F-84F, I don't want to give that a chance to shoot me, so I decide to go for that first instead of the ground attacker. Again, principle of take the escorts first, then deal with the bomber or ground attacker. That's the winged legend going through. The heavy came in at the same time, so that's my next target. Of course, even with the manoeuvrability build, I'm still fast enough to keep up with bot heavies. Again, it does the familiar, unexpectedly agile movement whilst being pursued, but down he goes. We have a healthy lead, but we're 3-2 down. Now this EF-131 looks as if he's fairly low health. This is the time to try and take him. See what my increased DPS can do. And down he goes. Lost the engine, and only the engine, fortunately, not the pilot. Just declined to go head on with this aircraft. Probably shouldn't get into a turn fight with this, it's fairly mobile. So I decide to actually go up, get away from it, and then come back down on it. Time is pressing because it looks like we're going to lose this sector if I don't get rid of this aircraft quickly. There we go. So we do hang on to it for a little bit longer. Looking around to see what I want to do next. Ground attacker. I'll have a look at its health, see if it's likely to go down. It's not, so I need to keep going for this. Otherwise it may take out enough targets to actually flip this sector. Right on the cusp here. Use the manoeuvrability to get around for quick shots, avoid the rock. Down goes the ground attacker, and then I spot the bomber. And I decline the engagement because I'm behind him. And now we're in a tricky situation. A healthy lead, but a sector that looks like it's going to fall. And at this point I was worried, until I noticed that their EF-131 crashed, or at least one of them did, and I have no idea what happened there. But that was a real boon, because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to take that EF-131 down. And we've now taken the airfield, which has stabilised the situation a little bit. I can perhaps go off and do a little bit more, and now we've taken the other airfield, and suddenly things are looking good, provided we don't lose all our aircraft. Again, declined to go head on at the F-84, and now we get into a bit of a turn fight. And this is where this manoeuvrability build is key here. You would not be able to do this with a speed build. You'd have to fly away. Of course, you'd be able to do that successfully, and perhaps I should have done that anyway, rather than try and twist and turn with this aircraft. But as you see, I'm getting the better of it, and that's a fairly manoeuvrable plane. Finally get the lead right, and I dispose of the aircraft. It's been a busy battle. 19 kills. I don't want to die here, so I'm avoiding any further engagement. And there you have it, a host of medals and over 19,000 personal points. Let's take a look at the outcome of this battle. And from the centre we see it's a grade 1 fighter or a 5 chevron battle. And that grossed 178,762 credits, or silver if you prefer, of which very nearly 60,000 came from a premium account bonus. If we look in the message box, we can see there were no expenses. The aircraft wasn't lost, so there were no repair costs, and I was using what I call prepaid consumables. That's consumables that I bought in advance in a sale for half price. 8,848 aircraft experience, the base there 4,317, premium account bonus 2,158. This was a first win of the day at ×3, so the other bonuses stacked quite nicely there with 2,300 plus. 442 free experience, 334 is base, premium account bonus 107. One token here, and that's for a first medal of the day. That's for the Marseille. That's the Marseille there. But there's also an Akamatsu, a Winged Legend, a McCampbell's, and a Hero of the Sky badge. Look on the personal score tab, we can see that 2 of the class-specific missions were complete, and the other one for capture points was 4/5 complete. That gives you 14 points, which is enough for 5 chevrons. 19,420 personal points, 3 sectors captured, 19 aerial targets destroyed, just needed one more for the ace there. 12,147 damage to aerial targets with 28 criticals coming off those Aidens. Didn't lose the aircraft, and there were 660 capture points, of which 400 came from defending and 260 for attacking. On the team score tab, we can see that would have been enough for first place on both teams by personal points, equal first with the enemy MEP1101 by chevrons. Now, here is a story of personal points. Personal points do not always translate into game-winning tactics, and the proof of it's here. I have 19,420 personal points. Our SU-10, 11,000. Might have expected more from him, really. Not sure I would have expected more from the J7W3, just under 10,000 personal points. What we have here is 16,685 personal points and very nearly 19,000 personal points from these two players, yet it wasn't enough to win the game. A little bit of a door left open by the performance of this EF131, which is definitely substandard, but even so, one might have been forgiven for thinking that this would have been the winning team and not my team. That brings me to the end of the review section of the Supermarine Swift. This aircraft stock is tricky, you're missing enough equipment slots to make it awkward to build competitively, and the guns are hard to land. Once you have it specialised, it's a different story. There are 2 distinct possible builds as far as I'm concerned. The manoeuvrability build, which I like to use and I have demonstrated in this video, but I've also shown you the effects for a full-on speed build where you'd use it as a higher altitude interceptor. Whichever, you'll need to consider carefully how you're going to improve those guns, otherwise they will remain difficult for you. But once you do that, I found that this aircraft becomes extremely pleasant to fly. It's one of my favourites at Tier 10. Surprisingly, I would never have thought that a few years ago. Well, I hope you found that helpful, and that if you did, you'll come and see my future content. Stick around, there's a bonus battle, an ace, coming up. That's unnarrated, so this is where I leave you. This is the Noble Q, signing out.